want help?
No, it's just this. Thank you though. Just these. Oh, yes. Okay, clip on. Clip, and I got a good.
You can't go very far. How are you going to reach all that stuff?
I don't know. We'll have to figure that.
Do you want to, are those all books, all things you're going to reference? You want to put them
You
here?
know, they distract me
Okay,
if I have
okay.
them. I'll just.
Unhook and get.
I can. Look, I can do this. I can do this. Yeah, and it'll be good aerobic. Yeah, this is good. All right. Let me know when we.
Yeah, we're going.
Okay. All right. I'll just go ahead. Welcome. I'd like to take just a short. Well, you know, it doesn't need to be short, but anyway, little greeting and check-in. I'm Suzanne Sterrett. I recognize some of you. I have had some old, long back relationships we figured out, and have known Gretchen anyway, and I think I recognize faces. Somehow you're in my familiar place. But I've been in Missoula since 1979, so that pretty much says, okay, it's just cross paths. I love quilting. I come from a long line of family members who sewed. My grandmother quilted, my mother did not, except that's another story later on. But I had a kind of career boredom moment and went, you know, I love my work. I was working with children with developmental disabilities and loved doing it, but I just felt like I needed something more that filled my bucket. And so I just started kind of thinking about what could I add that, you know, is my thing. I'd sewn all my life and I loved sewing, but it wasn't like hobby. It was more functional. If I needed something, I made clothing. If the kids needed a toy, I could throw some fabric together. My stash was not anything of what it is today. And I was in Bozeman with a friend. We went downtown to just do some sightseeing, walked through a fabric store, we both sewed, and there was a woman with a long arm machine in the back. And I heard it, and what's that? And looked back, watched her, and went, I have to do that. I wasn't even a quilter, but the long arm itself was like this dance, this just mesmerizing thing. I just fell in love. So I started looking around and researching a little bit. This was in 1990. Come in, have a seat. In 1993, 4, somewhere in there. And then I realized that, well, they were a little expensive. Of course, I didn't know the future, that real expensive had not even shown up yet. And so I started looking into it. I found, but there was one quilter in Missoula area, lived in Seeley Lake, and she worked with one of the shops and would just pick up quilts and take them home. She rarely had contact with the quilter, and I tried to talk with her. She was just too busy, you know. She was the only one really in town. Then I found one in Thompson Falls. And she had a real different attitude. She just kind of had one in her house, thought it was cool, and said, yeah, come on up. You and your husband, bring your husband with you. And we both went up, and we used the machine. And as soon as I used the machine, I was just, I have to have this. And I realized that it couldn't be a hobby. It was too expensive. I've always worked in human service. Don't make a lot of money, but it's really wonderful. And so my mother-in-law, saint that she was, said, I'll help you with it. You can pay me back. I bet it'll be a great business. So I started a business on the side with long arming was not a quilter. I really want to send that out there. And so I thought, okay, I've got to practice on my own stuff. So I got bed sheets, I got, any number of things to really learn the basic, make lots of mistakes. And then I thought, okay, I got to make a quilt because that's a lot of work, and I want to know what it feels like to do the long arm stuff and risk that all that work somebody else did and is now permanently affixed. And so I quilted what I call the one block quilts and large pieces of fabric. So I have some fun books that you're welcome to look at. One block quilts. If you've never quilted before, which we'll have a chance for everybody to share a little bit, this is copied from an out-of-print book that is single blocks, and they're big. They're quilts. And so this has become, it's called Goose in the Pond, and this has become my favorite baby quilt. It is so fun. You can make it real scrappy and real diverse in fabrics, or you can make it 2 colors. And that's it. And so you have 2 absolutely adorable fabrics that you want to use. It's done. And it's really, really fun. So Goose in the Pond, a fun quilt. I'll pass this around. You're welcome to stay after, look at anything I brought. Please ask questions. I also have little notepads if you just want to jot a question down and slide it this way. You guys who are watching online, I understand you can do chat questions, and Arlo will field those to me. So I made a few quilts with single block quilts. I made a queen size quilt out of one of those blocks. I don't even remember anymore. And then that was it. I love fabric. I love what it does to me, to touch it, to look at it, to be with it. And a stash, I'm going to say, I do not allow myself, I just have too much fabric, I've got to use what I've got. Yep, that's good. That's a really important thing, to use what you've got. But that's your muse. That's your inspiration. And it might be. If it's not, then yeah, use it up, get rid of it. But when I go down to my sewing room and I have a fair bit of fabric, I'm looking through it and touching it. It's a drug. It really is. And I come from a long line, TMI here, but I come from a long line of addiction, and so I'd rather do this, I guess, than some of those other things. So I am not going to be teaching a class on color theory. I am not a rules person. I didn't start quilting like a lot of people do. I didn't continue quilting like a lot of people do. I do not. I have a thing of garlic and a cross and a gold stake that says quilt police will die if they come near me. So no, not really. I've taken classes from people who have that quilt police sort of attitude, and I've learned a lot. It's important to know how to do it right. It's important to know how to get it perfect. I, however, am not a person who spends a whole lot of time on perfect. Now, I do have a lot of fabric experience in my blood. I mean, when I was a little girl, my mom let me cut up fabric while she sewed. I passed that on to my daughter. It's just in us. And so that part of it, I'm realizing as I teach classes, is not everybody's had that exposure, and not everybody has that sensory awareness. So I'd like you to keep that in mind in any of the classes I'm teaching, that the sensory awareness of fabric is what will give you the jazz. It will give back to you. And that's where your joy will come. If in making quilts, it's a seal of approval, it's a check mark on a list, yeah, those are good things. I wouldn't say don't do quilting, go ahead. But I hope in my heart of hearts that where you get with quilting is in that deep sensory love of how it feels to handle fabric, to feel the fabric give something to you. And I know this sounds a little quirky, but I have analyzed this in myself after teaching some classes and gone, yeah, that's it. And then I talked to some non-quilter friends about it to check it out with them. Does that sound too weird? And they're like, no, that's what we all look for. That's what we want. We want that joy in life that gives it back to us. And so I hope you walk away with a little bit more of that. What I hope to give you too in this class about color and design and where do you start, how do you start, is that sense of finding where you want to start. What colors work for you? There is a lot to know about color theory. Study it, know it. And I can give you some guidance, a little bit of why does that work? Why does this work? Because those colors go opposite on the color wheel. And there is a plan for the way Cave Facet designs his stripes and his fabrics. However, I would bet more it's about a little of this and a little of that and a little of this, because he just feels it. He just knows it. And that's where you will really feel the joy of doing any hobby for that matter, but certainly, or any life experiencing, parenting, partnering, driving a car, anything. If we can alert ourselves to the actual event and doing of it and being with it, that is what gives us joy. That's what is rewarding. That's my philosophy. So that's my little bit of me. If we can go around and just introduce yourself with your name and maybe a little bit about what your quilting start history is, and if there is something you care to share right now about what you want from today, that'd be helpful. I will try to make that wind into things as best I can. Okay, would you start?
Sure. Diane Maxted. I'm sort of new to quilting. I'm going to say 4-ish years. But
Okay.
I've always sewn.
Yeah.
Kids' clothes,
Yeah,
whatever
yeah,
I needed. So I've
yeah.
always been familiar with it. But,
Yeah.
And, I've done the patchwork. But I look
Yeah.
back at that and I'm like, oh, I really didn't know what I was doing.
No, yeah, I can,
But, my most favorite quilts are ones that I pick the material out myself without doing a collection.
Nice.
Because it's so easy to just...
Yeah, go with, which is a great way to make a quilt,
have
and
done
we
those.
probably have done those in this room, but
Right.
it is very different, and that's
Right.
exactly what I'm talking
And
about.
some quilts are easy because that's the type of quilt I was making for the person, and then other quilts have been more complicated, all various. But I want to know more with... I'm a little eclectic, I think. I don't...
You might be able to pick that up here.
Yeah. So anyway, I just, if I pick up information, it's always a good thing.
Good.
So
Great.
anyway.
Thank you. Tell me your name one more time. Diane.
My name's Joanna. I just learned how to sew this past fall. I took a class. Yeah, it was really fun. It was so awesome. And my teacher in the class sold me a machine. It was great. And so I just started to learn how to quilt by watching YouTube videos then. Since that was just a good intro to sewing, and then I needed to also learn how to quilt. And so I've just made like a table runner so far, and I started working on like a solstice quilt sampler.
Nice.
Which probably will get done next Christmas.
It's okay.
I'm like 3 blocks into that.
Yeah.
So I'm very much a beginner, and so I thought that this would just be great to learn more about everything. I love the fabric. I love patterns. I feel like I don't really understand how they work together. So far, like when I've admired things, I kind of just try to recreate what I've seen other people do already, with like choosing their fabric selections, but I like to just be a little bit more confident about my own selections.
Super.
And putting things together.
Okay. Great. Thanks. Diane? Joanna?
I'm Kathy,
Hi, Kathy.
and I started sewing when I was, I guess, in 5th grade. And 7th grade, my mom said, I'm not buying you any more clothes. You're going to have to sew them for yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And then about 20 years ago, I went through a divorce and was thinking, oh my gosh, my income is going to be less. I'm going to have to figure out something to do for Christmas. I'll sew presents. So I went into Timeless Treasures, and they had this queen size flannel medallion quilt up on the wall, and it had trees and stars and mountains, and it was gorgeous. And it said, you can make this in, I think the class was 4 weeks long, $30. And I thought,
Whoa.
$30, and I had no idea that then you
For the
buy
class.
your own fabric, the pattern, and all that stuff.
Batting
So I
back.
said, sign me up. This is great. This is beautiful. And went through the class and was just smitten with quilting. And I found that as I was healing from the divorce process, that the act of quilting, you had to pay attention enough to what you were doing, but it allowed your mind to process things that maybe you needed to process outside of the quilting.
Mm-hmm.
So I found it just a wonderful way to deal with the news of the world and what the kids are doing, you know, with quilting. And yes, my stash has gotten out of control, but my
So is your
husband's fishing
creativity.
closet has gotten out of control too, so
Yeah, there you go.
it works.
Yeah. Thank you, Kathy. Diane, Joanne, Kathy. Okay.
Gretchen. I'm not a sewer at all, and when I was introduced to quilting, it was straight lines, and I figured I could handle that, right?
Mm-hmm.
But then I learned it was a lot more. Suzanne, I think, quilted my very first basic quilt.
I think I
It was
remember.
a fish one, apparently.
Yes, yes.
So,
I was just going to say, could that have been the fish one?
Yeah,
I was
yeah.
thinking.
But anyway,
Yeah.
lately, I've done a few quilts, and they were kind of blah. And so I just thought, maybe I'll just, get
Jump
more
in.
ideas.
Yeah. Nice.
So that's where I'm at. Thank you
Nice.
for having us.
You are very welcome. My pleasure. And how about our wonderful videographer?
Hi everyone, I'm Arlo. I'm one of the team of three here at Confident Stitch. I'm not much of a quilter, but I love color.
Great color.
Color theory.
Yeah.
So I'm happy to be sitting in on this class.
Yay. Yay.
Hi, I'm Kara. And I'm definitely a beginner too. I've made one quilt, but the absolutely simplest possible quilt you can make with squares that it's like a free edge. You know, you don't even have to do any
Oh,
ironing
right,
or whatever.
right.
Yeah, and I adore that quilt, and I had so much fun making it. And I've done other sewing, nothing too complicated and very irregular. Like I'll just go through a little, just a phase every once in a while where I pull out the sewing machine and get really into it. I did a bunch of aprons at one point with some kind of patterns that seemed more like it was like edging into quilting a little bit. But I'm really fascinated by the the interplay of color and pattern and how to make that work, but also just the combination of precision and freedom, and creativity that comes with quilting. So I feel like there's something in there that kind of feeds both sides of my brain, like the measuring, fitting, precise part, and then also the opportunity to be more creative.
Yeah.
So what I hope for today, I'm looking for inspiration to I'd love a little surge of energy to get back into a sewing thing.
Nice.
And then I'd love to a pattern, or to at least some ideas for what really basic entry level simple patterns.
Super. Got a few that can start you off, and if at the end of the day you feel, or the session you feel like, well, I know she mentioned these, but I don't know how to start those. Just stay and ask, and I'll give you the specifics. Yeah. Okay. Thank you, Kara.
And I'm Jenny, and Suzanne and I knew each other so long ago we can't even remember when
Yeah.
or where. I sewed all my life, started very early, and my mother, when I was about 12, said, you can sew better than I can, you have to make all your own clothes. So,
Yeah, that happens.
So I've
And
always-
plus we had home ec in school, so, that was,
Well, I took math and science.
oh,
but,
there you go.
But anyway, so
You can do both.
There's a lot of math in quilting.
There's a lot of math in quilting. There you go.
So I just started quilting, and I made a table runner, and I did a paper piecing session here, and so I have 3 squares I'm making into a wall hanging. But I also just started my first full-size quilt, which is a sampler, and got everything cut out, got started on it, and decided I didn't like some of the fabrics in it. So now I'm
Going back.
partly into it and changing things.
Mm-hmm.
But the thing that's the hardest, I think, for me is, the technical part of it is really easy to do.
Mm-hmm.
But trying to get color and print and texture
Yes.
together.
Yes.
I really it takes me a lot of time to figure that out.
Okay.
And it's instinctive, so I thought maybe this would help me have a little more ordered approach to
Mm-hmm.
it.
Mm-hmm.
So that I can look at, I need a 3rd color, I should go with.
Yeah.
So I have some parameters for it.
Yeah. Nice.
So that's why I'm here today.
Nice. Nice. Thank you, Jean.
I'm Leslie, and I've been sewing since I left the 8th grade, and thank you 4-H.
Mm-hmm.
So all through high school, I did sew all my own clothes except for my Wrangler jeans and my underwear. Everything else was sewn. Anyway, so when I was a senior in high school, this girl made a large quilt, and I loved it, and I thought, I can do that. So that was, that was in 1978, and I finished it in, I think, 2013.
Yeah. Yeah. Good
I
job.
made
Done is better
many
than
things in
perfect.
between, but
Mhm.
my house overflows with UFOs. So.
Oh gosh, yeah.
So anyway, I have sewn a lot, but I feel like I can sew so much, but if you put me like out in that room and I'd pick out my own colors, it would be the ugliest quilt you ever saw.
Wow.
There is nothing here that is artistic
Wow.
or skilled that way.
Huh?
If you give me the colors to choose, then
I'm going to show you a
it's
few things
beautiful
today, I
things,
think,
but
that'll say, oh, you like those too.
I really struggle with colors.
I love ugly
Things
quilts
to
because in my eye they're not.
That's some of
But-
what mine are called. This is the
Yeah.
ugly jean blanket. This is the ugly this. This is the ugly that. Now it's turned from ugly to rustic. So that's
Rustic.
my word.
Yes,
Yeah,
we have some
for
great
descriptions.
words now. That yeah,
So
yeah.
anyway.
Good,
And
good.
I'm just hoping for any help. I'll take any help I can get.
Great.
So, thank
Well,
you.
please ask along the way if you have questions. Yeah. Yeah. Okay.
Hi, I'm
And-
Jamie,
Jamie. Okay.
and did you used to be an OT or PT?
I worked with children with disabilities through Child Development Center.
Okay,
Yeah.
well, I was a speech therapist. a
Yes,
retired
there's,
speech
that's
therapist,
it, that's
where-
it. I can, yep,
Gate
I can
Elementary.
see you across the table with a little one, actually.
Okay.
Okay, there
Now
we
we
go.
got that.
Okay.
I have actually, I am a sporadic sewer.
Mm.
I'll go through spurts of, ooh, I'm really into this, and I have done this since I was little. I started probably when I was 8 and did clothing kinds of things through 4-H stuff. My first quilt that I worked on was with in my family, we do wedding quilts, so
Oh, yes.
when somebody gets married, everybody contributes a block.
Mhm,
We get sent fabric, we have to create something out of this block. Oh my, wow, those are challenging.
Yes, they
I
are.
am a rule follower, and it kills me in quilting. I want perfect seams, I want perfect points, I want the perfect colors,
Yes.
and that's why I'm here.
Okay.
I need somebody to say,
Okay.
it doesn't have to be perfect.
Doesn't have to be. No. No. So there are many things in my life that I've embraced with passion, and I have a friend who's been part of a couple of those, and she said, are you sure you weren't like a preacher or come from a preacher family or something like that? So if that starts to flow through me, just take the feeling and go with it.
We'll yell hallelujah.
Hallelujah. I can do that. Yes, yes. So we are here. Let me start with, I can reach it. Yes, right here. Here's mine. So I'm going to go through a couple of just super basic things. Yes. Oh, sorry, Kara. Yes. And I apologize on the printing quality there. Yeah. Oh, sorry, Joanna. Okay. So this is not by any means an outline even or any, it's just random thoughts I've somehow grouped in categories that are like, okay, try and remember to do this. Try and remember to talk about that. When you think about sewing and quilting, a couple of things. One, your environment's important. So if you were going to do any other important hobby, if you were a musician, the practicing every day that you eat rule is how we get better at it. It's how we learn to feel it. It's how it enters into us and us into it. And so having a space, if you had to practice the trombone in a closet, it wouldn't work. So you need a space that works for the thing you're doing and that supports you. Now there are a lot of, if any of you have taken classes from Vita Anderson, and if not, look her up. I know she has stuff a lot of times through Confident Stitch. She's the current president of our Quilters Guild, which I'll also give you more information about and strongly encourage being part of a guild somewhere. It's just a learning curve booster. Vita has a setup at her house just out of Missoula that is just like, to see it made me go, oh my gosh, that's what they meant when they said have everything within arm's reach. She has these sewing stations for teaching classes, like 6 of them, I think, and you're sitting at a machine. You have an ironing pad, like those wool pads, right on the counter. You have a cutting board right next to it, or cutting mat, cutting board. Did too much cooking this weekend. And then you have, what else does she have? I don't know. Anyway, it's just all right here. Now, that's really cool if you're working on something like paper piecing, something that, you did the paper piecing. If you're doing something that requires a lot of pressing before you go on to the next step, things like that, because the get up and come back, I don't know about you, but I've found I have more ADHD than I thought I had when I retired. And staying focused and getting it right and carrying things over to the ironing board and coming back to the sewing machine, it's really easy to get them out of order, and oh well. So having that kind of sewing space that gives you everything at arm's reach is really nice for sticking with the plan and following the mojo of, yeah, we're cooking here. And so, however, I also am older, and those of us who have reached an age where our bodies are going, I can't sit for very long. This is really uncomfortable. Then you have to think about, okay, maybe you do have some things right near you, but you have to walk across the room to iron. You have to walk across the room to cut. You have to do something where you get up out of your chair, you stretch, you move. You think about the ergonomics of everything, like is your cutting table at the right height? Is your sewing machine at the right height for you? And any of you have had OT exposure, occupational therapy exposure, that right angle stuff in your body, so your feet to your knees, to your hips, to your shoulders. And then your eye level where you're sewing. And think about how, if you're like this, looking at something down low, boy, that is just misery on your upper shoulders, neck area. So again, making the joy come to you so that you can bring it back in. And that's all about having the workspace. So having that set up in some way, and it doesn't have to be a designated sewing room. It can be the dining room table that folds up and puts away. I went to a workshop a long time back and made this really cool ironing board. It's not very big. It's a little bigger than those little wool mats. And it has this metal brace that clamps onto the edge of a table. And then it has a screw-in leg on one end. And it's just right there. and you can unscrew it and put it all, and the back of it is a bag, so you stick everything in the bag and it just leans up against the wall. Now mind you, when I'm using my dining room table, it doesn't get cleaned up. But anyway, if you wanted to, say that happened, you could. So in your space, these are just suggestions. Notice the word suggested materials. You don't have to have all this. We had a woman in the group that I did it with Overflow, and she is a hand sewer. She has wrist and shoulder troubles, and so the rotary cutting is out of the realm of possibilities for her. So she's hand cutting, hand sewing. So you don't need a rotary cutter and a mat. A lot of women quilted, and men for that matter, but a lot of women quilted long before we had rotary cutters. And so all of these things, snips and stitch ripper and tweezers, those are helpful. And the difference between scissors and snips, scissors are, when I say that, I mean like the full long blade scissors, the Gingers or whatever, Olfa, I don't know. What's your favorite scissor? Kai. Yes. Those are very nice. And so a nice pair of scissors, or shears, some people call them. Snips are more of a little handheld, squeezy,
I use it all the time.
Yeah.
All the time.
Yeah, and if you have a thread cutter on your sewing machine, which most machines do have, that works a lot like a snip, but even still, it doesn't cut it right and you have to snip it off. So having a pair of little teeny spring-loaded snips is nice, I think. I use mine a lot. The pressing stick, and I realized of all the stuff I brought, I didn't bring my little bag of these notions. But it's just a little wooden stick. There's actually a lot of different kinds. Some of them are plastic, some of them wooden. And one end of mine has like a chisel end. And it's sort of angled at it so that the pointy tip of it can do a nice job of turning something inside out and getting the corners out. So that's a real nice double use. And then the other end is rounded and curved so that you can do a finger press with the tool. So you can use your fingernail, and you can, like, say this is the seam and the back side of the fabric is here. You just run your hand right along that seam with your fingernail, and you don't need to press. I do not press hardly anything.
Really?
Not hardly anything.
You just finger?
I just finger press most
Really?
everything. And I'll tell you why. When you're going to match seams, that sensory part, if you, I'm not saying don't iron, I'm not saying don't press. That may give you the space and the feel that you like. I like being able to really feel that when the two seams butt up against each other. Mm-hmm. So if some of you are newer to quilting, I'll go into this more in some of the other classes, but the seam, I always press to one side. However, I've noticed a lot of recent quilting patterns are saying to press open. That's like, what? I can't breathe. Get me out of here. That is a rule. I'm sorry. It keeps it stronger. It's not a rule for the sake of rules, but boy, that seems like it really makes your quilt more fragile to press seams open. So anyway. Any questions on what I just said? Okay, I think you're all with me. So finger pressing to one side, and then taking the right side of a fabric and the right side of fabric together, and your finger is gonna feel where it goes boom, and it locks in like Legos. Mm-hmm. And you'll feel it. If you press it a lot, it's real flat, and it's a lot harder to feel that. So that's what I do. But that's not to say you shouldn't. Please hear me loud and clear that I'm not a rule. Don't follow my rules if it doesn't work for you. So the pressing stick, chalk and marking tools, sometimes that is really helpful. There's a variety of reasons to be marking something. If you do a Y seam, which is something that you have to sew almost to the end, then turn it and then get it lined up the other way. And so if you do a Y seam, a marking tool can be really helpful to mark that spot where you sew to. I really like the one you guys have here. It's like a mechanical pencil that has a chalk lead in it. And it's a real skinny piece of chalk that goes in it, and you can get refills then. And it's just a teensy bit oily. I mean, it's not oily like wrecking your fabric, but it sticks, it stays. It's not dusty chalk. And it's just wonderful. It's great for marking quilt designs if you like to quilt. Okay, so that's a favorite. Graph paper is really important. I have several packages of these at my kitchen table, at my bedside, in my sewing room. And I use the 1/4-inch graph paper. And I'll tell you why. You can cut a little piece of that graph paper out. You can put it under your sewing machine foot, put your needle down in to the first line, cutting it nice and straight right on a line. You can put your needle into the next line and then take a fine tip permanent marker and draw right along the edge of that paper on the base of your sewing machine, if it's yours. If it's not yours, don't do that. But and then you figure out your 1/4-inch seam. Now, while I'm not big on rules, and if it doesn't fit, fabric has a weave. It gives and it eases, and make that work for you, because I'm not into ripping stitches out too much if I don't need to. And but the better it's the old measure twice, cut once. The better you do from the start of measuring accurately, cutting accurately, sewing your 1/4-inch seam accurately, the better the whole thing is going to turn out. So the graph paper, 1/4-inch graph paper, put your needle in, you draw with your fine tip marker right along that edge that you just cut the paper on, and then move it out and sew a 1/4-inch and make sure that it has been done accurately. And I even draw my line like along the base and down the front, because there are times when you've got a long piece and you can't really get it lined up quite right. So that's how my eyes work. But graph paper is very helpful for making sure you're sewing a 1/4-inch seam. You might want to think about making it just a scant, just slightly smaller than a 1/4-inch, because, as is explained in a lot of books, when you actually fold your seam open, there's a certain teensy bit of space that gets taken up in that bend of the seam flattening out. So a scant 1/4-inch is going to be the most accurate. So if you have any trouble getting half square triangles to fit together, or anything that goes at an angle, or something like a log cabin where across the very middle you have tons of seams and across the top you just have a couple, that's going to make it bow out or curve in if your 1/4-inch seam is not a 1/4-inch. That's
Scant being smaller.
Scant, just a teeny bit smaller than, and I mean just teeny, just teeny. Okay, pressing mat, iron, camera. So as we talk about color and design and prints, the density of prints, the depth of the color, using a couple of tools, I'm sure some of you already have, your phones, your cameras on your phones, take a picture of your quilt, preferably hanging, preferably on like these. If you have it on the floor, try and stand up on a chair and get your camera over at it as much as possible. That angle of taking a picture of a quilt with your camera like this and your quilt like that it distorts your view, and you just aren't going to see it as true. So take a picture, and then look at the picture and see if anything jumps out at you with, oh gosh, all my red blocks are over on that side. I didn't even notice that. Let's spread them out. Or whatever might pop out in your head. And then another strategy is to switch your camera to black and white and look at it in black and white. And that will show, that's why I have these blocks done in black and white, because it gives me a good sense of, oh, okay, I don't want to have that competition. But you'll also notice that quilts like this, where there's a light fabric for the so-called background, she uses, or he uses, some other one there, and it's not part of the design because it's not balanced. It's just a kind of mixed up use of this little print here. And it comes out to your eye, but oh well, that's fine. And that's part of the charm to me. So then in the next box here is some of the things that the choices we make. First of all, and a friend that I showed this to, she said, well, isn't the purpose first just you? That you're doing this for you? It better be. So you might want to add that in there just to remind yourself. I rarely make a quilt for someone who is saying, would you make me a quilt like this? Or would you make me a quilt with that? I make a quilt and say, here. Because that's for me. That's what that process of making the quilt is that giving the joy back, and it's putting it back in. And the few times in my life when I've made a quilt to someone else's prescription, there were too many times in the process that I put some bad vibes into it. So it still was fine. And in the end, I gave it my blessing. But nonetheless, so it might be that this is just utility. It's just something you're making for the dog bed or for your bed or for a picnic quilt, or maybe it's for a quilt show coming up. And so that's good. All of those choices are going to make it real different. I have a daughter whose offsprings have 4 legs, and the quilts I make for her are not the same quilts that I make for other people who I know are not having dogs on the beds and who are not having, all that. But, so knowing what your purpose is. It could be art. It could be your own creative exploration, that you saw something that was your muse, your creativity, your jazz, and that may be spurring you on. And who's getting it, as I just said. So in the design mode, we have lots of cool books. Oh no, let me back up just a minute. Okay. So these books. This one was my first quilt book. It is my absolute favorite book. It's called The Careless Quilter. I think, was I lucky or what? This was a good way to start. So it is out of print, but you can find it at used bookstores. I would strongly urge you to get a copy or spend some time looking at this. These are ugly quilts. These are quilts that aren't your perfectly designed quilts. I personally love them, and I look at them and go, oh my gosh, they're very old-fashioned looking. They're very much, and then I will share too that one of the things that's really in my heart of hearts when I quilt is the mixture of the history of quilting and this may sound a little hallelujah, but remember the women who came before us, who brought all this together for us, who took a piece of fabric from an old shirt and cut it with scissors and made it fit, and didn't know the base knowledge that we can get before we even start sewing. I mean, they just figured out how angles go together and how Y seams work and how, all that. Whereas we can watch YouTubes and go, oh, I think I can tackle that, and off we go. So of course we're more in search of that correctness of sewing things together. But finding the joy in it is what I hope you leave here with, is if you haven't already gotten to that space. But have any of you have ever looked into, and I don't know if it's Gee's Bend or G's Bend, I've heard it both ways, but they are quilts that are made in the Southeast, and there's a museum in, I just spaced out the name of the town. But anyway, GEE, I love them. They are so wonky, and they're so, and yeah, red and black was maybe the idea of the quilt, and they're also very intentional from what I've read about them. So somebody designed something, they knew a block they wanted to use, but then guess what? That scrap of black wasn't enough. So in comes a green, and because that's what they had. And so there's this chunk of green in the middle of the black triangle. And so when we think of improv quilting now, it came from that. And those women took those quilts, those fabrics, and made something that they were proud of, that they loved, that they passed on. Oh, brother, just gave everybody a boom. Hit my microphone. Sorry. Anyway.
Could you spell that word with G's then?
G-E-E.
Oh,
G,
that's it?
yeah, G-E-E. Yeah, no, I'm glad. And bend, B-E-N-D.
Okay.
Yeah, 2 words. And once you look, boy, I hope it fills your heart with passion, and you just like keep looking and looking. I've never been to see them in person, and I'm not a bucket list maker. I better like today or I'm in trouble. And but that is on my bucket list. I'd like to see those. So anyway, she does a lot of photos, so that's inspirational to see just some basic photos. But she also gives us a lot of information about, like, especially medallion quilts, how to start in the middle, do something you like, and then build out from it. So it's a fun book. It's not, I don't make a lot of quilts from this, but it's my muse a lot, and I love looking at it. And then the history of quilting is fascinating to me, absolutely fascinating. Because I started in my business with the long arm, I was looking for a business name. And so I started reading up on quilts, and I knew my grandma quilted, but I'd never had a quilt from her. My mom spoke of them, and in her family, lots of kids, boys and girls, they all learned to sew, they all learned to knit, they all learned to do everything. And they're all knowledgeable. But these are historical quilt books that I really love. Dolores Hinson Quilting Manual. This is lovely. It has a lot of really nice information. Treasures in the Trunk is probably my favorite quilting history book. And Shared Threads is another really lovely one. So I was reading about quilts and quilt blocks and the history of quilt blocks, and there was a quilt block called Wandering Foot. Ah, ding! I got a long arm quilt machine, that works. Well, I read about it, and Wandering Foot was a block that was made in Europe, I believe, even before colonial times. But in colonial times, it was very popular in this country. And it was given to when your kids grew up to leave and be on their lives' path. However, then we expanded to the West. And when those boys usually went off to the West, they weren't seen again. And so it carried this terrible superstition, and it went out of use for a long time, for decades. And then, because it's a quilt block that's really cool, Google it or check it out in one of these books. It's really pretty, and there's a lot of variations on it, as there are in most quilt blocks. It came back with the name Turkey Tracks. So once it came back, it just boomed. And so there are a lot of quilts in, I want to say late 1800s with turkey tracks. I might not have that date quite right. But then this is also a really sweet old book. It's called The Pattern Library, Patchwork and Applique. It probably is not in print. But it just has some really cool classic patterns and what they're called. It gives the basic diagram of the quilt. This graph paper, I have piles of it in my quilt room of my drawings of some quilt and figuring out how to make it myself without buying a $10 pattern. However, I have also had a lot of times where I've gone, I'm just going to go down and buy that pattern. It'd be a lot easier. So the patterns are nice to have. But it's also, those of you who are math folks, I love it. I love figuring that out. I love kind of looking at, and there's another book, I can't remember if I brought it, anyway, it's a half square triangle planning design book, and it talks about how half square triangles, you can make almost any block out of half square triangles, a mixture of them. And so, so a half square triangle, just to be clear, is the square with diagonal to diagonal separating two fabrics. So that's a half square triangle. Lots of them in the quilts right around here in the shop here. Okay, so history, tradition, that's all out there for us to draw from. Then we also may have some current day, other inspirations that draw our attention. I just brought a few books that are kind of fun. This has a lot of Aztec and Latin images that can give us some ideas. If you like doing applique, there's some really cool patterns in here. It's called the Electric Mola, also an old book. This one, Signs and Symbols, African information, and it also is really lovely. And it just talks about like wavy lines. Where do those come from? And what do they mean? And spirals and some of the things that attract us. And I think that's the thing. Color theory is important to understand, but listen to your heart, listen to your eyes, listen to your brain. Say, I like that color combination. I don't like that one. Of these two quilts on the wall, one of them is more warm colors, one is more cool. You are probably attracted to one of them more than the other. Just listen to that. Be part of that. Now, understanding it is understanding warm colors, cool colors, understanding the triadic and the analogous colors. Are they right next to each other on the color wheel, analogous, or are they in a triangle on the color wheel? And then that gives more dynamic movement to a quilt. These two are great encyclopedic references. They're just really good, thorough books, and they're also old. And there are some wonderful current ones, I'm sure, but I've got these. This is my favorite. I look at it all the time to go, now, I'm going to make a quilt for so-and-so, and her name is Patty, and that's Irish. So then I kind of start looking through here and going, okay, where are some blocks that have Irish names or whatever? And so then, and it gives you, this is similar to the geese in a pond, but it doesn't have the half square triangles in the corner. So this is kind of a variation on Irish chain, but it's the Burgoyne's something or other. It's a war commemorative quilt. A lot of blocks are named after battles and war because the women were home worrying about their men off in battle. And or they came home and they made them to celebrate their return. So there's a lot of history. If you're a history buff, you can dig in deep to all this stuff. It's just, I find it exciting. I think it's really thrilling. Some language stuff on Scrappy quilts. I love Scrappy quilts. I love them. I don't tend to go with a fabric line and make them all perfectly harmonious. Not to say that there's anything wrong with that, because some of the better fabric lines do a really nice job of not just keeping it super boring, but they pop in a fun little color here and there. And so if you're in a hurry, a fabric line is a great way to go. And of course, we know at Confident Stitch, we have some wonderful fabrics to look at, touch, and ogle over. And if we wear masks, we won't drool on the fabric, so that's important. But Scrappy versus Stash Buster. I'm noticing my best friend in quilting is Pinterest. I'm sorry. I hope no one's like, but I can lose hours on Pinterest. And I have my quilting file has names of blocks to keep things organized. I have Scrappy, Stash Buster, Curves, Medallion, 4-patch, 9-patch, 2 and 3 color quilts. So, and of course I've opened that up over time, so some of them are lumped in the wrong spot. But anyway, I love just having that intense speed of running through all these quilt designs. It's overwhelming too, and I think it's contributed to my hyperactivity a bit. But anyway, but Scrappy means you got your laundry basket that has all those scraps, or maybe you are really organized and you have little boxes. I admire you. And you've got your strips and your squares and all your leftover pieces from a project, and they're organized so you can go to them. Great. But you're going to those, you're cutting them up, and you're using them. And you're forcing yourself kinda to go, I don't have the blue I wanted. This is going to have to work. And if you have to do that, find the zen of the history of all those women who have done this before you. Find that to just really immerse yourself in the fun of it and how it's magical, that what you're going to get isn't really in your control, and you'll get to find out when it's done. Stash busting, however, goes more to this look. It's I have a piece of this fabric. I'm going to get it out. I'm going to cut what I need for that block, and I'm going to make 3 of them on this quilt. So you're going to the fabric you have in a little bigger quantity, and you're intentionally pulling that together. So I've found those 2 terms lately are kind of bubbling up, and so I think it's helpful to know. I did too, and then I found, oh no, I couldn't do that quilt from my scraps. I don't have enough of any one thing to get that look. So, but I do have an awful lot of 1/4 yards or 1/2 yards or 1 yard, and if I were making a more planned design medallion quilt with this fabric here, here, and here, I wouldn't have enough. But I have enough to do quite a bit, and can pull from that. So just to clarify, scrap quilt, stash busters. The fabric can be your choice and your muse. You can start with shopping or looking through your own stash and going, oh yeah, this fabric, I love this fabric, I love it. And just, I'm not kidding, it's kind of goofy, but I might find a piece of fabric like, I think I got this here actually, like this one, and go, I love this fabric. It's kind of weird and I don't quite know how to use it, but I'm just going to hold it and walk around my fabric a little bit and just, oh, there's one, and I pull it together. And then before you know it, you're going. So trust your eye. If it says, yeah, I like that. Or if it says, that fabric says, that could go. No, maybe not. Take that out and set it over here. Because you may find that when you pull a few more in, then it really does. And so it's trusting that we all have our own tendency for warm colors and cold colors, for combinations of colors. We lean to one color. And if we deny ourselves that because the color theory says this goes with that, you're missing a chance to make a really cool quilt. And so, so I think that it will let your heart lead. That doesn't mean the quilt's going to turn out perfect. It means you're going to experience it. You're going to feel it. You're going to absorb it into you. And you're going to grow from it. And when you get done, you're going to go, okay, I won't use that fabric again. It really took over. Or I won't use that fabric that way because it just got lost. That's how we learn. Mistakes are growth. And I don't even like calling them mistakes. It's just doing. It's just experiencing it. So let yourself enjoy the learning. Oh, I'm so sorry. I forgot to turn that off. Now I have to find it. Oh, there. Okay. So fabric can sometimes be your muse. It can start you going. Again, a fabric line might be a cool way to go. And I don't know if this one has it, but remember that fabric often, nope, it doesn't. Fabric often has the color strip on the selvage. I think this one does. Hopefully I probably won't find one that does. Anyway, it has those dots or some kind of reference to the colors, and it's the inks that are the dyes that are in the fabric. And so this would have a tan. It would have actually 2 shades of rose because there's a real pale shade to give it depth and a darker shade. It might even have 3 that I can't decipher. It has a lavender that's pretty flat. It's just one lavender. And then it has a dark outline. So those dots would be on the edge of the selvage. And sometimes we can miss a color because it's just only used a teeny bit. And if we look at those dots and go around and, kind of match or see what pulls out of our stash, we can then get something that would surprise us more, that would give that quilt a little more spark, a little more zing than we thought. Because maybe we thought, oh, it's purples and tans mostly. This little red, I don't know if I want to go purple and red. That's kind of weird. And so we may miss a color that would really pull it out. And so Gretchen, your comment about not kind of having that pop in your quilts anymore, right, lately, that's one way to kind of spur that. Then what you can do, so that's what I did with this box.
Can I ask something?
Yeah,
stuff?
please.
Are they, are they in an order? I've never paid attention, like the most prominent colors as they
I don't know the
come
answer to that.
Or are they
I don't
in
think
a
so.
sequence?
I don't think so.
I don't know. I would assume it has to do with the order that
They're printed, I bet.
So-
Yes,
Okay.
I bet that's it.
Okay.
Yeah. So the layering of they run it through in one color and then they run it through and the other color hits. Yeah, so it's probably, I would bet that's it. I don't know. Anybody knows the answer to that? Please share with us.
Seen them, but don't pay attention.
Yeah. So I'm sure I have one here that has this one. Yes, there it is. So this has all the dots. Yeah, they're great. So see, they give you a little reminder. This is weird. There's a white one. It says it doesn't. Oh, there is. There are some spots that have no dye. And so just teeny little spots there. So it does have white. So that would give you, like if you were thinking about a background color. Some fabrics, I would stick with creams, thank you very much. I'm not much on a bright white. That's me. That doesn't mean bright white doesn't absolutely make something electric and wonderful, but that's me. This, I might throw a little white in there, and it just, not a lot, but maybe just a little bit, and that could really make a difference. So sometimes when you go back to looking at these strips, this is a cool guide. Okay, so this would be how I do it at my house. Is I had this fabric and I just want to use it. Now guess what? It does have the white, so that's kind of cool. And look, it does a nice job, I think. And so then maybe I don't know what I found next, but maybe I found that. Maybe I went to my lavenders and purples and thought, okay, let me start pulling. So here's this. Okay, that works. Well, this is a very weird fabric. It has this dull gray. So hue and tone refers to how, and shade refers to how much black is added into the true color, or white is added into the true color, or gray. And gray sometimes is like a brownish too. It's not necessarily the gray we think of. But this has, for those of you at home may not be able to see this, it's mostly lavender, and it has a little caramel color, a cream, and this, oh, what blue would you call that? It's gray blue. It's a dusty blue. I'll pass that around. And then this one's a weird one. I'll pass that around. And it's got a little green in it. So, okay, that one went to greens. Okay, now I start looking at my greens. And I've got this one with a little burgundy purpley. So now I'm moving to burgundies instead of purples. So now I might be pulling this. And I'm in my sewing room, I truly do this. I throw them down on the table or on the floor, and I start making a spread of them. And then I squint my eyes. So your photograph on your camera, you can do that. You can change it to black and white. That will give you a nice sense of the depth of the brighter colors and the softer colors, and what goes more to the gray, the mid tones and the brighter tones, and the more backgroundy stuff. And so I start throwing these things out. Well, this is another favorite fabric. This wasn't about color. This was about, I love this fabric. I'll be darned. It's got that goldy caramel. It's got green. It's got, oh, okay, how's that go? Well, it's interesting, and it might work in certain things. I don't have a pattern yet. This is not where my pattern is. My pattern didn't come in yet. Now the pattern might be the start. But I tend to lean to scrappy, mixed up prints, mixed up colors. And so this is kind of how I go through my color choices.
Start with pattern.
Yeah.
What's the consensus?
Oh, I say you find what works.
Yeah.
You find what works. I have seen patterns, like for instance, Goose in the Pond. I know that pattern so much. I made 1 million of them, and that pattern would be absolutely beautiful in these two. And that's it. Just the 2-color quilt. But it also has room to start going scrappy. And in the 9 patches and the 3-bar strips of the Goose in the Pond, I could start pulling something like that in there. And then I could think, well, wait a minute, I like that caramel. Maybe something like this could pop in there. That could be nice. So coming back, now, pattern in your fabric. So print and pattern in your fabric. I like a mixed up, muffled up, goofed up world. My other career is mental health, so yeah, I like it. We're all messy, and these are all pretty different. They all flow real differently. This is another favorite fabric. I love this weird green. It's just mushy green, but I'm telling you, it goes with I think it goes with so many things. And where did my big print? Okay, so you start throwing that. Oops. I always turn them over so I don't get the white selvage. I don't know why. This white selvage makes me crazy. So here we have all these. And now I'm starting to cook. I'm starting to feel like, okay, we are having fun here. This is a really weird print, and because of the white, it really jumps out. The white jumps out, but I really like it. So it's better in small pieces. If I were to cut a big half square triangle for Goose in the Pond out of this, those white sections would and you'd go, is that something on that fabric or what, But if I cut it up more, they'd scatter all over. So that's another way to think about prints that have something you like, but that brightness pops out. Again, taking a photograph. Another tool is, at the hardware store you can buy the peep holes for doors, and you just get one. You just buy the peephole that you'd push into a door, and you can look at something and it makes it farther away, and so by distancing yourself you see the overall effect of color and how it blends. So you can do that with your pile of fabric. So you start throwing all this. Now then this one comes into the picture. Oh my gosh, it's got the grays. That's good. I haven't pulled those in yet. It's got the golds, it's got the lavenders, but it's a real organic, modern print. I don't know, does it work? I'd say yes. Go. This is like my grandmother's print, and I love it, and I just want this in there. So that's gonna go. So this becomes my next quilt. Now, pattern. Okay, now I had it here. All right. I'm gonna pass this around. I'm sorry, I don't know if you guys can see this, but it's truly ripped out of a magazine, and I just went, oh, I love that. Oh, and it was an article on somebody's quilt shop, like, I don't know, somebody's, and Missouri Star or somebody. And I'm going to pass it around. Now, when you look at a quilt like this, you start to go, oh yeah, you need like 15 fabrics. Absolutely. But there's also a background and a border. Okay, I'm going to need a few yards. So then that starts to guide me to go, okay, I have plenty of this. I have plenty of this. I don't know, that's really, so something that reads solid or reads print. It's how, when you squint your eyes, do you look at this and see a solid caramel? Yeah, pretty much. But this you see, and you have more of a blurry mishmash of the two prime main colors that are in it. So, so the way fabrics read, if they read solid or not, if they read solid like this one, but they have a lot of dynamic texture, that's sometimes referred to as texture. That's also something to think about. It moves more. It gives your eye. And when it says that a quilt is more dynamic, well, obviously, quilt doesn't move. It's an inanimate object. We're not taking drugs here or anything. But what it does is it moves your eye. So that's the movement in a quilt. That's the dynamic quality of a quilt. So when you use a quilt that, like this one here with the animals and the, I'm assuming it was paper pieced. Yeah. That one has a lot more pattern to it than I might have chosen to do. But I really like it too. And part of what makes it really interesting and fun is that don't follow the rules. That it isn't this solid color in the background and these printy things in the objects and, you know, making that happen. Now the little, and then the little bunny, or I think it's a bunny. Whoop. Oh, I can't do that. Not without holding on. So this little, what, is it a bunny? Yeah, it is. So this is all pretty muted colors. It's harder to see that it's a bunny.
I didn't see it was a bunny.
Yeah, yeah. So that's the thing that if I'd have put a pile of those fabrics together, I think I'd have realized that the white and the dark green are the only two that really show up. The others kind of whoosh into each other. Is it wrong? No, it's not wrong. It's just different. It's just a different way. Some of my favorite quilts are really muted colors, and they're all, the whole quilt is that way. And when you look at it, you go, oh, that's a cream quilt. But then you start, whoa, okay, there's some half square triangles in there. Oh my gosh, it's a churn dash pattern and a such and such. And you start to notice these subtleties of these depths of cream and tan and caramel and how those blend together. So it's not that it's right or wrong. There isn't, it's like a good cook. A good cook may use a recipe, but they've decided that recipe for them today, I want it spicier. Or today, I want it softer. I want it to feel good in my tummy. And that's what you know, that's what you go with. And then you let your soul kind of drive you. So I have not gotten to hardly anything, and I know we're getting down to the wire. So I'm gonna grab this couple of things that, no, these two things. I'll do these two things, and then I think we're probably about ready to cruise. A cool thing I think to do is to check Facebook or Pinterest or some online quilt source that you use, Missouri Star, Quilting Daily, Everybody Quilts, or all people quilt. I would say everybody, all people quilt. There's oftentimes they'll have a sew along or a block of the month or something like that. There's been a sew along on Facebook through American Patchwork. My favorite magazines are American Patchwork, Fawns and Porter, Love of Quilting, McCall's. I think those are my faves. There isn't one I don't like, but those are my tops. I like all three of them have a really nice blend of quilt patterns in them that, one, the patterns are well done. Two, they're manageable. They're not so overwhelmingly complicated. But also they're not like chunky, big, a 9-patch quilt, you know. That's one 9-patch for a queen size bed. Which also is pretty if you have the right fabrics. There just isn't a rule that I couldn't think of a reason to break. So they're doing this quilt that's on the cover in the sew along, and I think if you do American Patchwork sew along, even though it's either over now or just about over, I'm not actually keeping up. I think you can go to the site as a group and sign up, and then you can follow all the days that they've done it. But they're doing 2 different blocks a Monday a week. That's this group. Other groups will do 1 a month, maybe 1 block a month, but you make 4 of them or however many. And it's a really good way to move yourself out of that comfort zone of, oh, I always make purple quilts, you know, and try something different, because you'll also see everybody else's work because they're entering their blocks as they finish it. And so this quilt has been done in tans and blacks. red and black and white. It's been done in multicolors. It's been done mostly green, mostly whatever. I brought you mine to show you real quickly. I'll just run through them fast because they're wild. I wanted to play. I wanted to move myself out of, okay, that doesn't show up right, or that does. And so here, these are all the same block. This one's a little out there. This one. The fabrics that started me with this were these two prints, this one and this one. Okay, so they're they were a fabric line, obviously. But then I just started kind of sticking with primaries, and then I went off of primaries, and then I went to some moderns, not so much the vintage, and so, and then this is another block. Now, look at what happens when you have this fabric in a big piece versus this same fabric all cut up and mixed in. And so it helps you absorb that process of learning. There isn't a book out there, there isn't a pattern out there that can say, oh, don't use that fabric in that piece. No, we've got to learn, we've got to experience it. Okay, this gives a whole nother flavor. Same with that. So all these bigger pieces of fabric really change things. Now this makes that fabric not quite as busy as the first one, not quite as isolated as the second one. So that changes things. So anyway, there's just a whole bunch of them. This one I used as the background, a really patterned fabric. And now, believe it or not, these are all going to go together. I'm going to sew them together. I really am. And whoops, sorry. And so those fabrics.
But
so
you put them on a design board.
Yes.
Figure out
And a
there's too much
design board.
busyness,
Well,
or-
I may not. I may go, yeah, that's busy, all right. What fun! A design wall, our eyes as humans, we stand on 2 feet erect, and our heads and our eyeballs and our brains work together so that seeing something in that plane gives the brain more complete information. When we see something on a table or bed or floor, it does not take that in the same way. I'm not saying it's bad. I put my quilts and blocks on the floor forever until I had a space that gave me a wall. But a design wall, there's lots of cool things you can do for a design wall. I use construction foam sheets. It's about a 2-inch styrofoam kind of thing, and then cover it with white flannel, and then lean it up against my wall. And the flannel helps the fabric stick, and the styrofoam lets me use pins if it won't stick. But if you look up, make your DIY design wall, you'll find all kinds of options. Okay, so for those of you who are going, yeah, but what am I going to do? I would suggest looking up Geese in the Pond. There are some wonderful patterns out there for that. Here's an assignment I will suggest. You don't have to do it. Start with 2 fabrics. Do super small, maybe even just a block or a table runner or a baby quilt out of 1 large block, whichever way you want to do it. And take 2 fabrics. Then when you finish that 2 fabric quilt, take those 2 fabrics and go to a fabric store or your stash and start pulling in this. And then make a bunch of half square triangles. Now, if all that is like foreign to you and you're, no, that's the 4th class, I don't know how to do half square triangles, then don't. Just cut squares and just randomly sew those squares together. And I promise you will find something that's appealing in it. And certainly the learning process. Another thing is to get, and this is a nice way to just kind of give yourself some structure, is to get 10-inch squares, which are called layer cakes, correct? Yes, I get all that stuff. It's like, lollipops? Are we baking? Are we sewing? I don't know. Cupcakes? I don't know. Anyway, so you get the layer cake package, and you can either buy a layer cake, which is 20 or 40. You can buy lots of them.
42.
42 maybe, squares that are 10 inches, cut 10 inches. You take those, and then you'll, I have to remember how this works. I'm sorry. I'll come back to the specifics, but buy a stack of layer cakes, or go to your fabric and do this pulling the fabric thing and cut 10-inch square. Okay, so that's what I did. I have a friend in need who is needing a quilt and who's a Grizzly fan. So I thought, okay, here we go, maroon and gray. So I went to my stash and I found all of these maroons and grays. Now, would they have always plaids, prints, moderns, everything? This one's apple cores, weird. Anyway. This one's really organic. It's a kind of art print. That one's really fun. This one, a really different print in it. And then I set up my, I don't know if I can make this show for you as nicely as I wanted to. I'll try. Okay, so then I take my layer cake, and I might, these folks at home are going to need a little space to see. And I cut 2.5. This isn't the same print. Okay, we'll just do this. Here we go. There's that. So this would have been my layer cake. Okay, I'm going to cut a 2.5-inch strip, another 2.5-inch strip, and then this will be 5. Because it's 10 inches square. Mm-hmm. Then I'm going to take all my fabrics and I'm going to take the middle one out. And I'm going to start mixing them. And I'm going to put this in and sew them together. Mm-hmm. Then the 2 squares are going to go perpendicular and they'll get mixed up. Mm-hmm. And I'll have grays that'll be this and maroons that are this. I'll have some grays that are gray, light dark gray. You know, these 2 are the same fabric. Mm-hmm. This is the changer. Okay, so that's another thing to try. It's a fun way to play with a lot of fabric, and if you feel like you need some structure and space to go, okay, I've got to have some basic color frame, then pick 2 to 3 colors that are good for you, that you like. And then start with something that represents those 3 colors, and then go to your stash or fabric store and start pulling. Mm-hmm. And if you want to start with something already designed for you, the layer cakes are great, because with 42 fabrics, you are not just getting somebody's totally prescribed stack, but you know, there's going to be enough variety, I think. So those are good blocks to just kind of push your color sense a little. Whew. I think, how are we time?
We're doing pretty good. We've got 3 minutes left.
Oh, 3 minutes, man! This is a miracle. Okay, let me show you some fun ones. This is a table runner. So those of you who said, "Oh, I've just made table runners." Oops, we're on that cord. Okay, we're pulling you all over. Sorry, I got a mess. This one is a picture of a quilt that I saw in a catalog, and I thought, "Oh, that's so cute." But how does it work if I did a table runner? It was one of the hardest things I think I've ever made, because it wasn't designed to be a table runner. And this was one of those color extravaganzas of mine. So I had these things laid out. I was playing with different ones, different fabrics, and this was the last fabric I picked, and to put it right in the middle there.
Yeah, that's
And
interesting.
It's okay. I mean, I like it. I like it, but it's kind of strange, I'd say. It's a little out there.
Conservative with your
It
choices.
is. It is. And I say bust out. Kick up your heels. This one was the Block of the Month class that I taught here. This was another good color expansion. It was each month we did one block, and it really was scrap. It came from my laundry basket of scraps and Confidence Stitches, and the class pulled fabric from there, plus their own, and it was lots of fun. Lots of fun. And then here's what I was saying about the log cabin and how your 1/4-inch stitch is really important, but not the end of the world. Is that if you look across here on the back side, when you go across the middle, you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 seams. If your 1/4-inch stitch is a little big or a little small, over 8 seams, it'll magnify. But then if you look across just this top edge, you have one, that's it. So I've read things about log cabins being the best beginner block. I say, please don't, you'll be unhappy. Unless you're already a really decent seamstress and sewist, whatever we are, and really have that 1/4-inch seam. But that's the only critical piece in this. It's not hard block at all. But if your 1/4-inch seam is not consistent, you're going to have a block that's all. This is one that was. This was a fabric pile, and this is called the puzzle quilt. It's an old pattern. And it's fun. It's one of those stack and cut and then shuffle the deck, if any of you know what that is. And this got weird. It has more yellow in it than I like. I'm not a yellow, but I like it. And the border did it. The border did it. Yeah, before the border, I really was like, okay, I don't know if I like that, but yeah. Yeah, and this is what I refer to as a zinger, and that is a color wheel trick. You go opposite the color wheel, and you pull a fabric that is so.
How would you know what was opposite?
I don't know. On this, yeah, you don't. Yeah, I said that and then went, well, not on this quilt. It didn't work that way. But anyway, you just kind of try and get something that's not the same, and it is a brighter. And maybe it's just like, maybe instead of a warm color that it's next to, it's a cold color. Maybe it's just going in that kind of direction. But it is something that pops, as they say. This is a Lost in Space project. This was one of those not enough. Well, I like it now, but I didn't. While I was working on it, I expected to get more of a 9-patch Irish chain effect. And then when I got all done, it's a little lost. I think it kind of disappeared. I like it. I didn't. It took me a while because it wasn't what I expected.
It's a fireside quilt.
It is. It's very warm, very cozy. So is that a rule? No, it's not a rule. You don't have to. You can
How do you figure out what you want to use as a top stitch?
As the quilting?
Yes.
Oh, I almost always do what's called a variegated shell on my long arm. And it's a really nice overall filler quilting. Here's Gretchen's heard me say this. This is custom quilted. I did a grid here, I did a stipple here, and the borders have spirals and those. Does it show? No.
Yeah.
You know, to most people, that's like, okay. Quilting adds texture and gives depth. It gives, and where it goes down into the batting, it gives a shadow, so it adds movement in the colors. Your eye will move. And so there are some quilts where if you have light fabric and you're going to use a thread that really shows up, doing a custom quilt design is really nice. It's beautiful. It's incredible. Or we wouldn't know all those heritage quilts and think of them. It's fabulous. However, I quilt a lot, and I hardly have a day I don't quilt. And getting it done is more important. And most people aren't going to notice, quite honestly. So my suggestion is go easy, go cheaper, if you're having someone else do it for you.
I do.
Yeah.
Just sort of an overall.
That's mine. This is Goose in the Pond. And so that's the two colors. Yeah.
That would be really. Yeah.
And it's super easy. So you have your big half square triangles. If you need help with, but how do you do that? Please let me know. I'll tell you. And then the 9 patch. Yeah. That's it.
That's cute.
It's really simple. It's really simple. And if you mix it up and do it scrappier, it's really fun too.
Could you just Google Goose in the Pond and come up with the pattern?
Geese, I think it's Geese in the Pond
Geese in the
quilt
Pond.
pattern.
Okay.
Yeah, and you should be able to find one. This is another real easy, and this is truly the scrap quilt. So I do a lot of, they're often called stacked coins or bar quilts. And I do a lot of borders that are like this, piano keys sometimes they're called. And so I'll end up with lots of leftovers. And then if you put a strip on either side, and it doesn't even have to be the same width, it's just that when you cut, you get a square. And then crisscross, and there it is, done. That's a fun baby quilt. This is a project with friends that, again, is like push yourself and see what happens. A group of friends, we did a row by row, it's called. And so the plan was that each of us pulled some fabrics from our stashes, put in a tub, gave a little written something about what we wanted in our quilt that we received back, and passed it on. Did one row ourselves and passed it on, and then it went to another person, and they interpreted everything their own way, maybe added new fabric to it, maybe didn't. And mine was Twisted by Joni Mitchell. And so I said, whatever it does, I want it to spin. I want it to turn. I want it to move. And so, and I gave them the lyrics to the song, and probably half of these fabrics were in the tub. And I started with, oops, sorry folks at home, I just gave you a weird noise, I bet. I started with the Snail's Trail block, this one. And it is basically a log cabin. It's super easy. For those of you who are going, oh my God, I could never do that. Yeah, you can. Super easy. And then some people made up their own block. That one was made by a friend who's now in Australia. This is called a Twisted Log Cabin, I think.
That's really cool.
And it's paper pieced. And that's a friend of mine who loves paper piecing. And this one's super easy. Each block is a rail fence. And that's what we do for wedding quilts, by the way. Rail fence. So all the blocks ahead of time with the middle strip being white or cream. And put all the blocks in a basket with permanent markers and say, sign here. And then sew them together, and they've got a quilt that has everybody's signature who came to the wedding. So that's fun. Or send them to people who can't make it. And then pinwheels. These are just half square triangles. pinwheels. And then I added this at the end, and it's paper pieced. It was not, I can't say, oh, it's easy. It wasn't real easy, but it was, you know, if you get paper piecing, it's not too bad. So that is my day with y'all, and I have a couple other stacks of fabrics, a little simpler than this crazy mess. Help yourself to looking more closely at anything. And Pinterest. Oh, look up color mixing on Pinterest. That's where this came from. Color mixing. I love because it has tints, tones, shades. It has tertiary and quaternary, and you know all the basic language of color theory. It's wonderful. But again, listen to your hearts. Listen to your own drive, your own interests, and follow it. Go.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you all for being here.
Thank you.